when you tap into that, whatever is meaningful to you, and you focus on that first, then people pick up on the joy and the energy change that brings.
Hello, and welcome to the Connect podcast. This show is all about helping you connect to your soul's calling so you can take action on it. Because the sweetest success is a blend of discovering your purpose with the inner drive to bring it to life. I'm Sheila Botello, health coach, lifestyle entrepreneur, and mom of two, best known for my online wellness programs, mentoring, and self-love passion. Listen in for inspiring interviews, solo chats, and Q&A sessions that will move you past overwhelm towards what lights you up. Stop accepting good enough and go for your version of great in your health, business, and relationships. Let's get started. Welcome to the podcast. I'm grateful for the many gifts that travel has brought to my life. I tend to gravitate to people from different cultures and love to learn from their travels as well, which is what initially intrigued me to interview today's guest. As you listen, you'll hear that there's so much more depth to the story that I hope you find an encouragement wherever you may find yourself. Samantha Touchais is an author and a business and mindset coach helping women create and enjoy successful businesses. She has over 20 years of marketing and strategy experience working for large international companies, but it was her love of how the mind works and how to create the right mindset for success that led her into coaching. She works with clients on a one-to-one basis as well as offering online courses for self-led learning. We talked about her journey from corporate life to designing her own business, her many travels, motherhood, and helping women discover their version of success in life. Enjoy the conversation. Samantha, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so happy that you could be here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be with you.
Now, your work is in coaching ambitious women and in career transition, and I'm going to have you talking more about that as we move through the conversation. And also, you do a lot of traveling. You've lived a lot of different places. You're also a mother. I would love for you to share with our listeners a little bit about where you grew up, where you were born and raised, and then what are some of the experiences that have brought you to this work that you're doing? I'd love to hear your story.
Sure. No, thank you. I was born in Sydney in Australia. And I was told actually from a very young age by my aunt that I would travel. I just remember it was like a prophecy that she said to me. And I thought, oh, that sounds good. And then as I grew up, I had a very stable childhood. We moved house once, that was it. And I spent the majority of my childhood living in the one place. And I loved Sydney because Sydney is very diverse. I grew up with all sorts of people from all different countries and surrounded by lots of different food. The weather's amazing, beaches, all of that stuff. So it was a fantastic childhood. But I always had this urge to go and explore the world. And I don't know if it was because of this one simple sentence that my aunt said to me, a one-off, one of those comments that just really, really speaks to you. But when I'm trying to think of the age now, I was 22 and I moved to Hong Kong. And I was offered an incredible job with my company. So I'd finished my university degree and was doing a graduate program at a very large company. And I applied for this position and got the position and moved to Hong Kong. And I remember the time I was getting ready, I was packing and suddenly it hit me and I thought, what on earth have I done? I've been desperate for this adventure and this travel. And I traveled quite a bit at that stage, either with my family or by myself. And it just hit me. And this feeling of absolute terror. And that was this amazing moment where I think it's probably one of the first moments where I really discovered a lot about myself. But it was this love of adventure that I think just carried me through. And, I arrived in Hong Kong and I spent a year there. The day I arrived, I cried as I was traveling there. The day I left, I cried because I didn't want to go. So, that was really the first experience I had as an adult of pushing myself outside my comfort zone. And, when I look back at my childhood, and I had really a very protected childhood, I guess was exposed to different cultures and different ways of thinking, which I'll always be really grateful for. But it was still a very sheltered childhood. And suddenly moving to a foreign country, thrown into the mix. And, Hong Kong is just a fantastic place, but it's absolute chaos. I don't know how that place survives. It's total chaos, full of people and cooking smells and noises, and crazy expats are all out there having a really good time. It was a real eye opener. And I think that really developed this feeling of, we have this huge world to explore, traveling, holidays, there's lots of great ways you can explore the world. But it started this, I guess, lifelong love I've had now of challenging myself, because I realized that when you do things that are really uncomfortable, there's always something, growth that comes out at the end of it. And, that was such a huge moment for me, having that time in Hong Kong. And after that, I moved back to Australia and worked there for a few more years, and then moved to London in the UK, and then moved all around the UK, and then ended up in Switzerland, in France, in Germany, and now I'm back in France. And I've lived in all these places. I've traveled the world for my job. I speak 2.5 languages, and I say half because I tried to learn Swiss German, which is...
Your 2 languages are English, French, and Swiss
French.
German.
And a bit of Swiss German. Okay. So yeah, it's been such an incredible journey. And, looking back now, even though Sydney's very cosmopolitan and international, it's amazing. I just see myself as this little girl in the house I grew up in a very sheltered life. And then I look at everything I've gone through, and I'm now 43, and I've still got plenty of life left in me, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I've lived a whole entire life in just half a life. So it's been, lots of ups and downs, huge challenges, but just something I'm so grateful for, a life I've really, really loved so far.
I love this idea of traveling, opening up ideas for and ways of growth for you, and also challenging yourself to come through to the other side of something, to see what you're capable of. I really can relate. I actually got shivers when you were talking about how you arrived in Hong Kong and you were crying when you got there, and then you cried when you had to leave, because when I was 18, I went to teach English as a second language in Brno in the Czech Republic with a few friends. And that experience, same thing. I remember crying the first few weeks of just trying to get into this, because I was teaching architects English, and here I was just 18 years old. And then I fell in love with the community of beautiful people and going to the mountains and the freedom that was so different from the Western world at that time, because this was 1991. So the Berlin Wall had just fallen. And so they were starting to get their entrepreneurial ideas and spirit up. And I was involved in seeing that happen. And then when I had to go, I did a whole tour of Europe after that in a month before coming home. So again, seeing all those cultures, but I was so sad to get on that plane to come home, because it had really changed me. And I felt so bonded with these people who initially had felt so foreign to me at the first time. And then you realize everywhere you go, we're all really the same. We might speak different languages or do different things or eat different kinds of food, but our hearts are pretty similar in that we love our family, we want to have good lives, and we have potential in us just waiting to come out. So I'm curious to hear how I can see how it would all connect, but how is this connected to your work? What was the work that took you traveling all over the world? And then what is the work that you're doing now?
Okay, so I followed a pretty traditional path. So I finished school, I went to university, did a business degree, and then got a graduate program and stayed in the corporate world for 22 years. And it felt like the right thing to do at the time. And I look back at myself and think there is no way I could have started my own business at that young age. A lot of people can, and I think, I take my hat off to them. But I had to go on this journey, and the journey was perfect for me, as I think all of our journeys are. It absolutely brought me the lessons I needed to learn. I, loved aspects of my corporate life, but there were so many, all the politics that goes around these corporate environments. A lot of the time, I know a lot of companies now are very, very aware of it and things are changing, but, at the time when I started out, a lot of politics, fantastic bosses, fantastically terrible bosses, and, everything that comes with corporate life. And before I had a family, that was okay. You know, I could absorb the stress as much as I needed to. I could do whatever I needed to do to get rid of it. But I think when I got married, and then we were talking about having children, and there was something that I didn't realize actually until I had my first son, that when you have a family or something else, it could be some other project that you're focusing on or you're needed somewhere else, you have this tug of war that really goes on between responsibilities, you know, what I should be doing. And there's a lot of this I should be kind of conversations that I think, you know I went through, and I have a lot of my clients that go through, particularly women, and particularly when we decide to get married and have children. Mm-hmm. Because there's, as much as we've advanced in society, there's still absolutely very clear expectations on a lot of women. And I think what's been really eye-opening for me actually is moving around the world. And I haven't actually added up how many countries I've been to, but I have really traveled extensively. And some of the European countries I've traveled to and lived in have surprised me the most. They're the most traditional, shall we say. I want to say backward, but that's not necessarily true in many aspects. But, you know, I think as women, we need to decide what is important to us. But when I have these conversations with my clients, and when I think back to the conversations I've had with myself, it's very difficult to allow ourselves to do something for us, because we're wired, we're programmed to think of others first. And even if I look back at the corporate environment pre-family, I was always thinking about others, thinking about the team, what I need to do for my company. And I just gave it 110%, which is very much my personality as well. I'm aware of that. But you know, then when I had children, and I remember with my first son, he was in daycare all day until nearly 7:00 at night. And I had to travel quite far to get to the office. And I used to feel sick every day dropping him off at the daycare center. And this was in France at this stage. And it was a wonderful daycare. He loved going, but we'd have this separation anxiety. And obviously I tried not to push my feelings onto him, but it just did not sit well with me. I'd get on the bus afterwards and think, this is not what I should be doing. And everybody is different, and it's absolutely no judgment on anybody's situation. I needed to work. I'm that kind of person that I needed something different. I'm constantly having to challenge myself, and motherhood was challenging enough in its own way. But I felt the desire to keep working, but I just felt dreadful leaving him at daycare. And then when I finally came to have our last son, we have boys in this family. It's all we seem to be able to do. With my little one, I just thought there's got to be something different. I want a different life, and I don't want this constant pool of responsibilities. And you know, again, for my job, I was doing international marketing and traveling everywhere, and it was fantastic. I love the travel. But every time I'd pack my suitcase, getting ready for a trip, and there'd be a little voice saying, oh, here, mummy, why don't you put this in? Or can I come with you? And it would stab me in the heart. It was horrible. But again, you know, I needed to go on that journey. Looking back, I needed to go on that journey to be able to help people now. And it's not just about trying to have motherhood with corporate life. You know, that's a big, very well documented challenge that I think women are still absolutely going through right now. But it could be anything. It's when you think, well, this is what I need and this is what the others around me need. How do you find that balance between the two? And how do you do that with the confidence and I think that's a really, really big challenge for women in particular.
Absolutely. And so you made the shift. And how old are your children now?
So 5 and 9.
5 and 9. Yeah. I have 2 boys also. So I held up two fingers. That's one. Yeah. And it's interesting because we do all have a different path to motherhood and then through motherhood. And there is no right or wrong. I believe the only thing that we should be looking at, and I'm always talking to women about this, is looking within and what is right for you personally.
Yes.
And making whatever that is okay. Not comparing, because you're going to show up as the best version of a mother and the best version of a business person when you are doing what's in alignment for you. So how have you found now this shift? Like you began your coaching business and
Yes.
are your kids, like basically you're seeing them so much more now throughout the day. How have you found things have been the last few years? I know it's been a little bit of a different time. How have you managed to
Yes.
work through that?
That's been a surprisingly big challenge for me in the fact that I am a bit of a workaholic and I've always loved the jobs I've done. And now that I'm working with women and we're building their businesses and talking about ideas, some of my clients haven't even started a business yet. They're just coming up with ideas and trying to find the confidence to go into their own business and follow their dreams, really. And I just love it. So I found it very hard at the beginning to separate the two and say, okay, at this time now, I need to stop. I need to go and pick up the kids, or I'd have them with me. And, to be really honest, I don't think I handled it that well at the beginning. And I think too, because of the emotions and being tired and just, building and being lost in my thoughts. And I'm someone who loves to get lost in my own thoughts and daydream and create. And every time I'd sort of start to get into the zone, I'd hear, "Mummy, mummy," and somebody interrupting that thought pattern. And I found that really, really stressful at first. But exactly as you say, I had to go back and do work on myself and say, okay, well, what do I want? What is the point of all of this? What's the ultimate goal for me? And part of that journey is showing my children that I'm doing what makes me really happy. I'm not working as a slave to my job. I'm helping people. And it was funny because, we've just moved again recently, and hopefully this will be the last move for a very, very long time, famous last words. But my sons, both of them had to start at new schools. And my older one, I'm trying to think of the words he said. He was asked what I did for a job. And he said, I help people. And he couldn't quite explain how I help them because he doesn't really understand the whole idea of business coaching. He understands starting your own business because he and I are working on a little business plan for him at the moment.
Love it.
But it's great. But this idea of helping people was what came out of his mouth first. And I was so touched by that because I see that he sees I can make money, I've got a business, but at the same time, I'm helping people achieve what they want to achieve. And that's so empowering. And I think, that's what I want to share with my children. That's what I want to share with my clients. And a lot of the social media connections I have and a lot of the posts I do are really about saying it's getting in touch with what you want. And then you will have mindset issues. You will have family issues. It's very hard to stand up and say, look, this is what I want to do. And I think again, looking back at my own experience, my mother, so she was born in 1940. And that was a time, she was growing up in Australia at a time when women had a choice of being a secretary, a nurse, or a teacher. And if you didn't want to be any of those, you would stay at home. And that was it. And she ended up being a hostess, which...
Sorry, could you say that again?
Sorry, she ended up being an air hostess with Qantas. Well, actually, wasn't called Qantas then, but yeah, she ended up being this glamorous air hostess.
So this is where the travel bug bit you really.
This could be where
genetic.
It could be. But and then she had to give that up because as soon as you got engaged to be married, not even married, but engaged to be married, women were told you have to leave. It was ridiculous. So she gave that up, and then she had me. And I remember when I was about 12, 13, that kind of age. And I came home from school and she said, I have something to tell you. And she was so nervous. And I thought something terrible had happened. And she said to me, I found a part-time job and I really want to do it. It's just while you're at school. I think there was one day a week she wouldn't be there when I came home from school. I would have a babysitter. And she was terrified of my reaction. And it's stuck with me all these years because I remember saying to her, but does that make you happy? And she went, yes. And I'm like, well, do it. Like, why would you? I mean, thank you, but why would you even need my approval? This is for you. So I think, we women worry so much about pleasing others and these, as I said, these I should be doing whatever it is, this I should statement. And sometimes, exactly as you say, when you tap into that, whatever is meaningful to you, and you focus on that first, then people pick up on the joy and the energy change that brings. And, if someone's not happy for you, then you might need to rethink that relationship and see how you can approach it differently. Because, how can you begrudge someone? And I'm talking theoretically here. Obviously, there can be ramifications to who looks after the kids and to other aspects of life. But generally speaking, you should support those ones that you love with them fulfilling the dreams that they have. It's the ultimate sort of road to joy, really.
Right. And I believe that's love embodied, right? That's how we
Yes.
unconditionally love each other, is how can you do what makes you happy, and how can I cheerlead you and support you in that? And then that's going to, if we're in a loving relationship, it's going to come back to me in the same way of that kind of support. It really does, though, Samantha, point to the conditioning over, really, since the beginning of time, the gender roles. And they're not just stereotypes. They were gender roles that were built in for women to uphold. And so that guilt, and we talk about mom guilt a lot in my circles, and we're like, gee, where does that come from? Well, it's modeled for us either from our own parents, or it's just so prevalent in society that we take it on. And it's almost like in our blood and bones, this idea of, I need to be the one who's on the home front only. And my hopes and dreams that are emerging from within me, well, they don't matter so much as caring for and raising a family. And yes, raising a family is beautiful. I love motherhood. It really changed who I was. I was married 10 years before starting a family. And so it was a real intentional choice. And I'm so grateful I did it. And I knew what life was like before and after, like before being a mother. So I knew that I had some dreams and things I wanted to do. And like yourself, I was able to gratefully get my kids on board very easily with, well, I have things that I want to accomplish and you do too. And let's all cheerlead each other. It's just interesting, though, when you shared what your mother said, the fear of really not being a quote unquote good mom probably was at the root of that fear for her. And probably her doing that was so different from the environment she was living in with all the other women in her midst, that she was probably also fearing that judgment. And so it's beautiful we've moved past that point in time in the world. However, now that women are out working and have been for quite some time, still so much of the domestic responsibilities have fallen on their shoulders. And so to find an equal marriage, it's something now that people need to be even more intentional about. So I'm curious, as you're coaching these women, you were talking about the shoulds, and you said to me that many women have a really big challenge believing that they deserve their dreams. They deserve to be living the life they want and to be happy. And they even deserve help at home and in more of an equal relationship. What are some things that you walk your clients through as they're approaching this? Do you have certain questions or practices? How do you, get their partners involved? Like, what are some of those wonderful, juicy tips?
Yes. So that's a really good question, actually, because, and obviously every situation is different, but I see themes coming up. And a lot of my clients are in the 40, 50s kind of age group. And obviously, depending on when they had children, I'm still kind of in the trenches with the younger ones, but I have a lot of clients approximately my age whose children are older. And, they get to this point where they say, you never stop being a parent, you never stop being needed by your children, and who would want to be. But at the same time, they've reached this point where they say, well, actually, there's an opening in my life now. My children are teenagers, or they're growing up, or they're off, busy with their sports, with their friends. And suddenly there's space, and space terrifies people, particularly when they've been so busy with family and these obligations. And suddenly having space in front of them can be quite scary. So, one of the things that I find works really well, I'm a really big believer in communication and talking through feelings. And, ask my husband, it drives him absolutely crazy, but I'm always saying, how are you feeling? What's going on? I pick up on feelings as well. Me too. It drives him absolutely crazy. But it's so important too, because, I think the other thing that women are particularly good at, and I'm saying that a bit facetiously, but is assuming that people know what's going on with them. Because we are so good at picking up on our families and our friends, and we're the caregivers, we're naturally wired to pick up on body language and signs of what's going on, and we expect the same back. So I think the first tip is always to talk about what's going on for you. Mm-hmm. And not defensively, not feeling like you have to defend yourself. And I think that's where a lot of these women go wrong in many ways, because of this guilt and this feeling of, oh, should I be doing this? Should I not? Maybe this is selfish. And they have all this self-doubt. And self-doubt leads quite often to defensiveness, because then if someone does say, well, who's going to look after the kids? And that will bring out that defensiveness. It does two things. It either makes them really defend their position and say, well, I have the right to do this, and which can obviously start off in arguments and they don't get very far, or it pushes them back down to say, oh, yeah, okay, you're right. I won't take that step forward. So I think, the first thing is always talk about what's going on and why it's important to you. And I think when those around you can understand that why, and I'm really big on finding the why, not just for other people, but for yourself. Because, no matter what change you make in your life, if you don't understand really what's at the core of it, as soon as the going gets tough, you'll just give up and stop. And that's the way the brain is actually wired. The brain wants the easiest path. And as soon as you, put your head up, sort of stand up tall poppy a bit and stick your head up above all the other flowers, the brain freaks out and says, hang on, this is different. This isn't safe. Get back down where it's safe. So, you've got to talk about your feelings, understand why you want to make this change. And then the question that I find is actually probably the most important question is, what is the worst thing that can happen? Because women in particular, I'm giving women a hard time today, but women in particular are really, really good at, I guess, thinking about the worst case scenario. And again, it's the brain's way of saying, get back to what you know, get back to where it's safe. This is your role. This is what it's supposed to be. And it's an evolutionary thing where our brains haven't kept up with society. So it's a natural thing that's happening. It's no fault of that particular individual. It's just a very normal process to go through. So when you say to yourself, okay, but what's the worst thing that can actually happen? It switches on the logical brain a little bit as well, calms the emotions down, and you can start planning through and say, okay, well, what happens? Well, then I'm not there for, my child when they come home from school. Okay, is that a problem? Yes or no? And you start working through those issues that are coming up. Or, perhaps I might have an issue with my partner or with my family, and you can, I guess, approach those things before they actually happen, so that if they do, and most of the time, the worst thing you imagine doesn't happen. If it does, you're prepared. So there's not this defensive reaction. There's not the stepping back down to the smaller position. It's an anticipation that can help you plan and manage that situation so much better than if you just suddenly, it flares up because you haven't done that preparation beforehand.
Yeah, that's such a great question to ask. And I'd love to take people to the next question too, which is, how would you feel if this worked? How would you feel if it all happened beautifully in the way that you hope? And that can give you a lot of, just take a deep breath in, a lot of pause that, okay, well, why don't we actually focus on what we really want? But I agree with you, like focusing on what could go wrong helps us to really address that fear instead of just having it floating around in our mind. We can get really practical. I love how you walk them through that question. It's incredible when you think about different lifestyles, different things that people want to achieve. And it feels like it doesn't matter what it is, those fears do pop up from time to time. And then often, like you say, what we're fearing doesn't happen, but then other things happen that we didn't even imagine. And I know for you, you had mentioned that you had experienced an illness. And I would love to hear, if you're open to it, what happened to you, and then how did you work through it, and how has that impacted your current life, your parenting, and even the work that you're doing?
Sure. It was a completely life-changing situation in a terrible way and a magnificent way. I was, I think a lot of things led up to the illness, and I'll explain in a second what it was. But I think looking back at my life, I've always worked really hard. I've always packed so much into my life, and I've never really taken the time to care for myself. And I've always been like that. I'm a high achiever, and I'm someone who was afraid of having space and quiet. So I was always fitting my life, filling it in with everything that I could, and these challenges. And that was part of my identity. I thought, if I'm not achieving, I'm not winning and succeeding, not in a competitive way. I'm not a very competitive person at all, but in this sense of my own achievement and knowing I was overcoming things. And so that really meant that I was very driven. And the idea of just having it, like if you'd said to me, have a day to yourself, I'll take the kids, I'll take, and that would have absolutely set me off in a panic. But, and life happens in wonderful ways. Maybe at the time we don't realize that. But my husband and I went through a really tragic situation, actually. After our first son was born, I was then pregnant with twins. And there was a condition I had, and they died just after birth. And that was something that almost destroyed me. And I think if I hadn't had my first son to look after, he pulled me through that without realizing. He was only 2 at the time. And, I kept saying, I've got to keep going for him, and I've got to get through this. But during that period, I was extremely stressed out, and not in a very good way. And I was still working full time in the corporate world. So I was in Switzerland at the time, and looking back again, it was a blessing, but I was told I had to take maternity leave, and the minimum in Switzerland is 9 weeks of maternity leave. And I remember saying to the doctor, just my face, still swollen from crying and everything, saying, but I don't want to sit at home and think about what happened. I just want to get on and be busy and just sort of process it in the back of my mind. And she looked at me and said, there's nothing I can do legally. You have to do this. And she said, I promise you it's going to be a really good thing. So I had that time to heal. And this is, nearly 6 years ago. I mean, I haven't even healed. I'm still recovering from all of that. But then when I was pregnant with our little one now, who just turned 5 yesterday, I say he saved my life, because during that pregnancy, the doctor discovered that I had actually 2 illnesses. One of them is genetic, which I strongly believe was triggered by all the trauma and the devastation with the twins. And the other one is an autoimmune disease. And again, I think a lot of these autoimmune diseases come about through a lot of stress and do live these days. But both the illnesses are extremely life-threatening. And one of them, I remember the doctor when she was telling me, I just couldn't take in what she was saying. And my youngest son was born prematurely. So I had this tiny little thing next to me in his little car seat. And she was telling me, you've got these illnesses. And it wasn't until probably 2 years later that I looked it up after I'd come through. And I'll tell you how I did all of that in a second. But using the power of my mind, I actually went into remission really quickly. And then I started looking at the statistics and Googling everything, which you should never do when it comes to medical situations, and discovering, and the death rate is extremely high with one of these conditions I had.
Wow.
And it just hit me out of nowhere. And that was another big traumatic period I had to go through, because I'd never realized just how precarious my life was for a while there. But the reason I say, it was all dreadful. I wouldn't wish that whole situation on anybody. But again, looking back, I'm so grateful because, and of course, I'd rather have the twins with me. I don't mean that, but going through that process, and again, coming out the other side and realizing that, I say I'm a mum to 4 boys now, and that's why I was joking too about always having boys. That seems to be our thing, and I have 2 with me here and 2 in heaven. But going through the illness, it really opened my eyes to the power of the mind. And at the time, I had the 2 children then and our twins, but thinking about, I need to be here for them. I need to survive. And the illnesses that I had and the medication I was on made me so ill and so tired, and just trying to sort of manage life. At the same time, I was writing a book, which I then published, and I was doing all sorts of things in the background, and I ended up leaving my corporate career and starting my own business. And I think going through all of that really made me question what's important to me, first of all, and my why. And I started to realize that actually not living for someone else and having this crazy corporate career, that wasn't me anymore. So I started tapping into, what was me. And also, I think looking at how the mind completely controls the body and our environment. And I'm a total science geek. So, I'm very spiritual, but I'm very scientific, and I believe the two go together in beautiful ways.
Yeah.
But I had to research everything about the mind. I've read every book under the sun about mindset, about neurobiology, everything I could get my hands on, and really started studying the power of the mind and how it affects us. So, through that process, I went into remission really, really quickly. And I remember the doctor calling me and saying, "This is a miracle." And they're words that you don't often hear doctors say because that makes them very uncomfortable. But it really, truly was. And it's something, that was what triggered me to say, okay, I'm going to start my coaching business, which originally was going to be focused on mindset because that's so powerful and important. But I think a lot of people aren't ready to face that yet. It's very, very early days. And I think you guys in North America are much more advanced in that field and the health and well-being than we are in Europe. But there's still, people want to see results. They want to have something tangible. They want to be told, you're going to achieve these kinds of sales, or you're going to get, they want specifics. And mindset is not something specific. There's a specific science behind it, but everybody's different. It's a very individual kind of process and experience. So I ended up saying to myself, actually, well, my business career, my 2 decades, I didn't want to lose that. I wanted to keep the marketing, keep the business and the strategy. And I love all of that side of things. And I thought, well, actually, when you think about a woman in particular, exactly as we've been saying, who self-doubt, constantly comparing herself to others, constantly. And as a mindset coach and a business coach, I do that all the time. I mean, this is not something even consciously, and I'm trained, I've got all the qualifications I could ever hope to get, I still do this. So it's just something that, we all do. We compare ourselves. And as soon as you start to compare yourself to this imaginary person, either someone you're seeing on social media or just this idea of somebody, and I do this a lot, particularly as a mother. I've got this perfect mother idea. I don't know who it is. I've never met them, but I'm constantly comparing myself to them. And I realize this is such a powerful area to help women with. When you're starting your own business, you're going through, most of it is actually mindset, habit changes, relationship changes in terms of your subconscious, your belief system. And, I see so many clients who have incredible experience. They could make such a big difference in the world. And everyone else is cheering them on quite often, but they're holding themselves back because they don't have the right beliefs in place. And it's not a difficult fix, but you have to be aware that you need to fix it in the first place. And I think that's the big challenge that I find at the moment.
It really is like that neuroscience you're talking about, right? We have these neural pathways that are deeply, deeply grooved into our brains about what is acceptable and achievable for us, based on what we've seen, based on what we already have experienced. And then we also see other people who are these amazing successes in our mind. And we think, no, they're special. They're different than me. And yes, they may be different. However, they just had to form different belief systems. And they have practiced enough and built those habits in that their neural pathways are different, leading them to a different outcome. I love the science and the spirituality behind it. I think you're right. It's holistic.
Exactly.
That's why I love my training is as an integrative nutrition health coach, because there's the nutrition we put in our mouths that fuels the cells in our body. And there's the nutrition that we put into our minds that fuels our thoughts and our capabilities. And it really all comes down to that belief. So I love that you're guiding people along that journey. And yes, you're right. They may not think, oh, mindset, what's that? I don't understand. Even here in North America, I will say it's people want a tangible result. So helping them shift a career Great. We can get our minds around that. Now, what does it take to do that? Oh, shifting our mindset. And so having you to coach them on that with your business acumen and experience, your cultural experience,
Yeah.
and now also this incredibly deeply transformative experience you've had in your own life with losing two babies. And thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that, because that can't be an easy story to share. And yet here it has
No,
shaped
and I
you.
usually cry. I actually got through it without crying. So this is progress.
Oh,
I didn't look at you as I told you, though. I had to look away because otherwise I'd cry.
Well, and listeners to the show will know my story about various losses I've had in my life over the last, 8 years. But it's interesting when I'm looking at you, and from the very time our Zoom cameras opened up, this beautiful tapestry behind you. It reminds
Yes.
me of angel wings. And so I kind of felt like, your little angels are there surrounding you. And you must feel that sometimes, that connection, because yes, they were in your life for that brief moment and for a reason. And so here you are becoming even more who you're meant to be because of them having existed. Everything has a purpose. Nothing is wasted. I really firmly believe that. And I think it's beautiful that you can have the connection with your family, as you've shared with me that you do, to be able to work through these things and to hopefully impart that wisdom to them, that they can carry that with them also. Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
So
I think, the twins have taught me something really amazing very recently, actually. And, it's hard with the children because with my oldest son, as I said, he was 2 when they died and just about to turn 3, and trying to explain to him where they've gone.
right.
And being twins, I was big during the pregnancy. He never saw the babies, but trying to explain where they've gone. And then with our younger son, we talk very openly about the twins, and he knows he has these brothers, but they're in heaven, and now they're with his grandfather who died recently. So we talk about them being together. But the twins taught me this really valuable lesson, which it's incredible. Again, being a coach and helping other women on their journeys, I'm always open to lessons. And I say that carefully because I've had enough of the bad stuff.
Yeah.
I'm open to good stuff.
We're good now. We're good.
Yeah, we're good. I've had my lifetime of that. But, when you think about sharing your own story and this idea, and I've been helping so many women now with this comparisonitis and imposter syndrome and comparing themselves to others. And what I say to them all the time is, look at the people that you are thinking are really successful. Half the time they're not. It's part of their marketing plan. But the ones that really are always the ones that are true to themselves. And they're the ones who aren't afraid to, I don't know what it is, have crazy colored hair, or have a different approach to things. They dress the way they want to dress. And I really admire that. And that's what I think one of the many things the twins have taught me is this idea of just being you. And that means the journey you've been on, the experiences you've had, the good and the bad, the failures, the wins, all of this. And just the people that are the most successful in life, in whatever definition of success you want to take, are the ones that connect with others at an open, sort of heartfelt level. And it's not about impressing others. It's not ego-led. It's not saying, well, this is what I should be. It's back to this should. It's saying, this is who I am. And if I can be comfortable with that, then the world will absolutely be comfortable with that. And if they're not, then that's okay, because everybody has the right to their own opinion. And, this is what I'm trying to teach my children now with bullying and all of that, fun stuff that goes on with children at school. Children, they say it as it is. And, my oldest son was commended recently. I was very proud of him because he stood up for someone in the playground who was being quite badly bullied. And he called them out on it and then went and got the teacher. And, he risked, and he knew he was risking being the next victim. But he said, no, I had to stand up for her. She was having a really hard time, and he stood up for her. And I think this, having that confidence to just say, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. This is what is okay. These are my boundaries. And that's it. All I can do is just show who I am. And people accept that or they don't. But as long as I accept myself, it doesn't really matter what happens outside of me.
Powerful. If we can live our lives with that as a guiding principle, then we really release ourselves from the stress and the anxiety that gets in the way of the good stuff that is on the other
Exactly.
side of it. So here you are in this time in your life. It's been an interesting year. And that transition now from being gone so much traveling to building and crafting your own schedule, I would love to hear, because I'm all about self-care. What
Yes.
are some of your most favorite self-care practices that you instill, that you uphold, that really support you in your work and your life and your mothering?
Yes. No, that's a really, really important question. I walk every day. I'm a big walker. And what I've started actually doing recently, I love listening to podcasts. And this is how I found you, actually. I was out walking with you in my ears. Um, I love using that time to listen to podcasts or books and audiobooks and learning. But what I've actually started doing recently is not taking my phone with me and just letting my mind wander. And as I walk, I find things to be grateful for, little things. I'll notice that the flowers, and at the moment, I live in a beautiful village, a very, very ancient village in a wine region in France, and I'm surrounded by vineyards. And this village is just full of roses. I didn't realize, because we bought the house in winter. I had no idea. And it's full of roses. Every house is covered in these beautiful roses. And just little things like that, just walking around and noticing them. So I think that for me is self-care. It's not just, having a bubble bath, which I love, or a glass of wine, or whatever people say, that can relax you, but it's getting connected to the environment and getting rid of distractions and being still sometimes. Or you can walk and have your mind be still. It doesn't have to be a physical stillness, but getting connected to what's around you. And I think as soon as you start to do that, life takes on a different dimension. And then these I shoulds and shouldn'ts and these responsibilities find a place. There's always, we do all have responsibilities, but they take it as a perspective change. And suddenly we can appreciate what's around us. So walking is massive for me. And also there's the physical exercise, you do feel really good afterwards. That's important. Meditation. Now, this one, I've had a love-hate relationship with meditation for a long time. I'm saying that a bit tongue-in-cheek because I'm actually a meditation teacher as well. I give my meditations for free. It's sort of my way of giving back, and I'm on different meditation apps, etc. But sometimes I find it a challenge to say, okay, now I'm going to set aside time and I'm going to meditate. Because that means I'm not working on my business. I'm not doing a call with somebody. I'm not posting on social media. This is purely for me. And that has been a real challenge. And I think deep down inside, it felt like I wasn't achieving anything. Going back to this desire and need to achieve, and have outward signs, not for others even necessarily, but for me, these outward signs of achievement. I can tick off my to-do list and say, look what I did today. And meditation doesn't fit with that. So that's why I've had this struggle, even though I really, I talk a lot about meditation and help a lot of people with that. It's not even something I necessarily do in my coaching, but it's something, people do know me, that's a part of me. But yeah, I find that stillness and taking that time for me has been a challenge. So that has been a massive improvement in my life. Now that I'm doing it every day, I've managed to get back into a good rhythm. And it's habits. It's all about forming these habits and then feeling less resistance. So I'm doing that every day, and it's made a huge difference to my life.
That is amazing. Just having that time with yourself. And I can relate the sitting still when there's so much to be done. However, those times where we actually do get still and focus inward, we are way more productive later on throughout the day. We are more available emotionally for the needs of the people around us, particularly growing children who have a lot of emotional needs, right?
Exactly.
So good.
And it's good, actually. I've been doing it. This is a recent thing, but as a transition from work to the children coming home from school. And I found that moment quite stressful sometimes, because I'm at the end of my working day and I know I've got to switch into mum mode, which I love. But at the same time, my mind's still thinking that, hang on, I still just want to get that. There's always something that I don't quite finish. There's always an extra thing that I just wanted to get done. And I look at the time, I think, oh, I've got to go and pick them up. And then they're either tired from a long day or they're high energy because they're excited because they had a good day with their friends. And I found that transition quite hard from being by myself with my clients, because I do all my work on Zoom and all the time. And it's a different atmosphere to suddenly these, high energy boys coming home from school. I meditate now. The last thing I do before I go and pick them up is meditate. And I find it completely, it's a way to say to my brain, this is it. We're now transitioning into mum mode. And it works amazingly well.
That's amazing. Oh, Samantha, this is all so good. I've so enjoyed having you here with us today and sharing your story and sharing how you're helping so many other people. I love that we met. And
Yes.
I would love for you also to share where people can find and follow you online.
Sure. So my website is samanthatoutchais.com. And then all my social media handles are Samantha Touchais. So I hang out on Facebook. You will find me on Instagram. I'm more a Facebook person. It's probably my age. And on LinkedIn as well.
Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved our talk.
To those listening, thank you for joining us. I hope this conversation gave you a dose of inspiration to tap into your own version of how your life can look. Samantha and I would love to hear what ideas or thoughts came up for you as you listened today. Please tag us on Instagram to let us know. It's so helpful to us as we move forward, and you can find where to find us on Instagram in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here with me on the Connect podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with someone you think would enjoy it. Also, if you head over to iTunes to leave a review, I'd be so grateful. Let us know what your favorite parts were and what you'd like to hear more of. It will help us have a greater impact, elevating many more people to grow and succeed together. See you next time.